I let my brother-in-law stay in my house for just 1 week. Then his girlfriend also moved in and they trashed my place. My wife defended them, even threatened to leave me, so I told her, please do. I'm 36 years old, and I've always been the kind of guy who hates conflict. The type who says it's fine even when it's absolutely not fine, who smiles through gritted teeth, who gives people too many chances because I don't want to seem rude or make things awkward. That's who I was until the day my wife told me in a voice colder than I'd ever heard, if you don't apologize to my brother, I'm leaving you too. And let me tell you, after everything he did, after everything I put up with, that was the moment something in me snapped. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind. My wife Layla comes from a loud, tight-knit family where boundaries are more of a suggestion than a rule. I learned that early on. The first time I visited her parents' house, someone was already sleeping in our guest room because they needed it more, and my toothbrush mysteriously ended up in the kitchen sink. Still, they were warm and welcoming in their way, and Layla had a spark I couldn't resist. We got married 5 years ago, and while we didn't always see eye to eye when it came to family, we made it work. Until her brother Brian came into the picture. Brian is 41, divorced, twice, 3 kids with 2 different women, none of whom he sees more than once a year. Perpetually unemployed, always between opportunities, always convinced the universe is just one lucky breakaway from recognizing his true potential. He's the kind of guy who refers to himself as an entrepreneur, but what that really means is he tried to flip sneakers for a month and gave up after the first return request. The kind of guy who asks to borrow $50 and says I'll hit you back Friday, then ghosts you for 2 months and shows up with new AirPods. We weren't close, obviously. He always gave me a weird vibe, like he was constantly sizing me up, but in a lazy way, like he couldn't be bothered to pretend he respected me. Still, I tolerated him for Layla's sake. Birthdays, barbecues, holidays. I was always polite, even when he made those passive-aggressive jokes about me being soft or whipped. I kept my cool when he showed up late, when he drank too much at our anniversary dinner, when he asked Layla right in front of me why she didn't marry someone with a little more edge. I bit my tongue, because that's what you do for family, right? Then 2 months ago, I got a text from Layla while I was at work. Just a simple, hey, do you think Brian could stay in the guest house for a few days? He's going through something. I stared at the message for a long time. We just spent $15,000 renovating that space. New flooring, fresh paint, furniture from West Elm I never thought we'd be able to afford. It was my dream to turn that little detached structure into a quiet office, maybe even a recording studio one day. But it had become our guest house, and now it was about to become Brian's crash pad. I texted back, how long is a few days? She responded. Just till he gets back on his feet, maybe a week. I should have said no. I should have stood my ground. But I took a deep breath, thought about how Layla had supported me during my job change last year, and said, okay, just a week. That was my first mistake. Brian showed up the next day in a rental car, even though he claimed he was broke. And he wasn't alone. He brought his girlfriend, some woman I'd never seen before, half his age, all acrylic nails and side eyes, and her 2 kids. Not hers, from another guy. And they all moved in like it was some vacation rental they'd scored last minute. Within the first hour, the kids were running around the backyard, screaming, the girlfriend was blasting music from a Bluetooth speaker, and Brian was in our kitchen, helping himself to a beer I'd been saving. No knock, no thanks, no, hey man, really appreciate you letting us stay here. Just a smirk and a yo, your fridge is loaded. I glanced at Layla, who smiled nervously and said, they just need a place to breathe for a bit. Be patient, okay? I was patient at first. The first week came and went and there was no mention of leaving. Brian never even brought it up. In fact, he started acting like he owned the place. He'd barge into our house without warning to grab snacks, drinks, even toilet paper. One morning, I walked into my living room in a robe and found him sprawled across our couch watching sports shoes on crumbs everywhere. When I asked him how he got in, he held up our spare key and said, Layla gave it to me. Said I could come in whenever. I confronted Layla about it that night. You gave him our key without asking me. He's my brother, Weston. Don't make it a big deal. But he's not just visiting. He's treating this place like it's his Airbnb. She sighed. He just needs time. The second week, I stopped seeing my garage tools. My drill set gone, ladder gone. I found out Brian had been loaning them to his new friends in the neighborhood, other unemployed guys he played poker with in the evenings. I found cigarette butts near the flower beds I'd just planted. One morning, I stepped outside and found a broken beer bottle by the hose. The guest house, once pristine, now had fingerprints on the windows, greasy takeout bags stacked by the porch, and an actual piece of gum stuck to the front doorknob. Still, Layla kept brushing it off. They're trying, she'd say. It's not easy living with kids in a small space. Small space. It was 600 square feet with a full bathroom and kitchenette. I'd lived in less when I first moved out of my parents' place. Week 3 was when I really started losing it. One night I was working late in my home office when I heard loud yelling coming from outside. I stepped onto the porch to see Brian and his girlfriend screaming at each other. Not arguing, screaming. The kids were crying. One of them had apparently spilled something on her phone and she lost it. Brian started throwing things. I told them to keep it down and he snapped, "Mind your own house." Weston. My own house. I felt my blood rise, but I didn't say anything. I just turned around and went inside. I didn't sleep that night. The next day I told Layla, "They need to leave." She looked at me like I'd just kicked a puppy. "What?" "No, you said a week. That was 3 weeks ago. They don't have anywhere else to go. They're making this place a circus, and it's not just them, it's affecting us. I'm stressed. I'm not sleeping. I'm walking on eggshells in my own home." She didn't respond. She just walked away. That was the beginning of the silence between us, the slow shift from, "We're in this together," to, "You're the bad guy for wanting peace." Every time I brought it up, she shut down. Every time they crossed a line, she looked the other way. And Brian. He kept pushing, kept testing me. I came home one afternoon and saw he'd parked his car in my driveway, blocking my garage. When I asked him to move it, he said, "Relax, man. I'll move it when I'm done." I told him he had no right to block my space. He laughed. "Dude, you think I want to park on the street with those HOA narcs sniffing around?" I told him I didn't care about the HOA. I cared about respect. He scoffed. "Respect for what you think you're better than me because you got a little guest house and a 9 to 5? That's when I realized it. He hated me. Not because of anything I'd done to him, but because I represented everything he wasn't. Stability, responsibility, a life that didn't crumble every other year. And maybe that's why Layla defended him, because some part of her still saw him as the underdog, the one who never caught a break, the wounded brother who just needed someone to believe in him. But I wasn't willing to sacrifice my peace, my marriage, for a man who had no intention of changing. And then came the night that changed everything, the night that made my decision for me. Because up until that point, I still held on to hope. Hope that maybe they'd leave on their own. Hope that Layla would finally see what he was doing to us. But what happened that night shattered all of that, and it left me standing in the middle of my backyard, heart-pounding, fists clenched, as my wife screamed something I'll never forget. The night it all broke wasn't some big dramatic blowout, at least not at first. It started like any other night during those miserable 2 months. I got home from work around 6 o'clock, tired, hungry, and already mentally bracing myself for whatever mess Brian had made of the day. It had become routine by then. Come home, avoid the backyard like it's a minefield, sneak through the side door so I wouldn't have to cross paths with Brian or his girlfriend, try to eat dinner in peace with Layla. Fail at that, go to bed feeling like a stranger in my own home. Rinse, repeat. But that evening, something was different. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I saw the garage door half open. That immediately set off a red flag. I always kept it shut. I walked up to find the door wedged open by a cinder block, and inside, my stomach dropped. Brian and 2 other guys I didn't recognize were standing around my workbench drinking beers and passing around my socket wrench set like it was a toy. They didn't even notice me at first. One of them, some dude in a hoodie with a neck tattoo, was holding my brand new cordless drill, testing it on a 2x4 like he was building something. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Hey," I snapped. "What the hell are you doing?" Brian turned completely unfazed. "Oh, hey man, relax. We needed some tools. Julio, here's helping me build some shelving in the guest house. You got good stuff in here." I stepped forward, jaw tight. "This isn't a tool rental, Brian. You don't just take my things without asking." He rolled his eyes. "You weren't using it. That's not the point." The guy with the neck tattoo snorted. "Man's tripping over a drill. Chill out." I ignored him. "Get out of my garage now." Brian scoffed. "Dude, you seriously need—" I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I just walked over, took the drill out of Julio's hands, and held out my hand to Brian. "Keys. Now." He frowned. "What the spare key Layla gave you? Hand it over." He let out this mocking laugh. "Wow. You're really gonna pull this my house? My rules crap? Because it is my house and you've crossed the line." He stepped forward, suddenly serious. "You think you're better than me, Weston? Just because you got a nice little office job and a mortgage? This has nothing to do with being better than you. This is about respect, and you've got none." We stared at each other for a moment. Just silence and tension, and two men who, for completely different reasons, absolutely couldn't stand each other. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out the key, and flicked it at me like it was garbage. Fine. Whatever. I didn't say another word. I walked inside, went straight to my room, and shut the door. My heart was pounding. But I felt this strange wave of calm wash over me, like a decision had finally clicked into place. I didn't tell Layla about it right away. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I already knew what she was going to say. She twisted somehow. Say I embarrassed him? Say I overreacted? Say I made things worse. That had become our cycle. I'd bring up a problem. She'd make it my fault. And I was tired, bone deep, emotionally drained, tired of playing that game. So I waited. I let things stew, let Brian feel the shift in the air. For the next few days, he didn't come into the main house. Not once. He and his girlfriend kept to themselves, though the volume of their arguments only seemed to get louder. But even through the chaos, I felt like I had finally regained an inch of ground. Then came the betrayal. It was a Saturday morning. I'd just finished mowing the lawn when I noticed something strange. The guest house door was wide open. That wasn't unusual by itself. Brian was always leaving things open. But what caught my eye was the inside. The door frame looked splintered, like someone had forced it open. I walked over, confused, and stepped inside. I stood there, speechless. The place was trashed. I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking clothes everywhere, dirty diapers in the sink, takeout containers on the floor. Something I still don't know what smeared across the wall near the bathroom. The mattress had a giant red stain on it like someone spilled wine or fruit punch. The coffee table was broken in half and propped against the wall. One of the windows had a crack. The whole place smelled like sweat and spoiled milk. I backed out slowly in complete disbelief. This wasn't a mess. This was deliberate. I pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "You went in without asking?" I turned. Layla stood there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I didn't need to ask," I said, holding up my phone. "This is our property, remember?" She didn't look at the mess. She just stared at me like I had done something wrong. "You're spying on them now." "Spying? Are you serious? Look at this place, Layla. It's destroyed. They have kids, Weston. It's not going to look perfect. This isn't about kids. This is about disrespect. This is vandalism." She flinched at that. "Don't be dramatic." I took a step closer, my voice rising. "I've been patient, Layla. I've bit my tongue, I've let things slide, and I've put up with more than I should have for you. But this is where it ends." She shook her head almost like she pitied me. "You just don't understand how hard it is for him." "No, I do. That's the problem. I've been forced to understand while living with it every single day. You think I don't see what's happening? You've chosen his comfort over our marriage." Her voice cracked. "That's not fair, isn't it?" She turned and walked away. Didn't argue, didn't defend him, just left. That night, I slept on the couch. I didn't know if it was because I needed space or because I didn't want to be near her. Maybe both. The next morning, I walked out to the guest house with a box of trash bags and a lease termination notice I printed from a template online. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Brian finally opened the door, shirtless, hair a mess, face blank. "We're done," I said. He blinked. "What, you've got 48 hours to pack up and leave. I don't care where you go. Just go." He snorted. "You think you can evict me? I'm not your landlord, Brian. I'm your brother-in-law, and I've been way too generous for way too long. But I'm done." He looked past me like he was waiting for Layla to come running out and back him up. She didn't. "You're going to regret this," he muttered. "She's not going to take your side, then that's her choice." He slammed the door in my face. The next 24 hours were a blur of tension. Brian didn't leave. In fact, he started getting bolder, playing music louder, throwing trash into our bins like it was some kind of statement, parking across both sides of the driveway. And Layla, she barely spoke to me. When she did, it was clipped and cold. Sunday night rolled around, and I knew what I had to do. I didn't want it to come to this, but I couldn't back down now. I'd finally stood up for myself, and I wasn't about to let guilt pull me back into that doormat role. So I made the call. The next morning, I left work early, got home by 2 o'clock, and waited. At 2:45, a tow truck pulled into the driveway. Brian's rental car was gone in under 5 minutes. He'd parked in violation of the HOA rules again, and I reported it anonymously. But I wasn't done. At 3 o'clock, I knocked on the guest house door one last time. Brian answered furious. "Your car's gone," I said calmly. "And I've called the sheriff. You've overstayed your welcome and you're trespassing." His face twisted. "You snake." Before he could finish, Layla stepped outside. She looked between us, then walked right up to me. And that's when it happened. In front of Brian, in front of the kids, in front of everyone. "If you don't apologize to my brother," she said, eyes wet, voice shaking, "I'm leaving you too." And just like that, the weight of everything hit me. All the nights I kept quiet, all the times I stepped aside, all the times I picked her family over my own well-being. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't recognize the woman standing in front of me. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Not yet. Because I still hadn't made my final move. Not the real one. And they had no idea what I was about to do next. But I did. And it was going to change everything. I didn't say anything to Layla in that moment. I just stood there numb, staring at the woman who used to feel like home. Now siding with a man who treated me like garbage and trashed the place I'd built with my own 2 hands. My silence made her angry. I could see it in her eyes. She wanted to fight. She wanted me to yell, to beg, to make some dramatic gesture that would let her play the victim in all this. But I didn't give her that. I just walked back into the house, shut the door behind me, and locked it. Then I sat down in the dark of our living room, hands on my knees, and stayed there for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there in this dull, suffocating stillness, trying to figure out how I'd gotten here, how I let things get so bad, how I'd become so small in my own life. That night, I didn't sleep, and the next morning when I heard Brian and his circus finally pulling out of the driveway, yelling, slamming doors, kids crying, Layla's voice cutting through it all like static. I didn't go outside. I just listened to the chaos fade until it was finally blissfully silent. Then I went into the guest house with a garbage bag and started cleaning. That was rock bottom. Layla didn't come home that night, or the next. She sent a single text on the 3rd day. "I need time. Staying with Mom." I stared at it for a long while. Then I turned off my phone. At first, the silence was unbearable. I'd gotten used to the noise, the constant hum of chaos in the background, the yelling, the music, the passive-aggressive comments, but now it was just me. The house was too quiet, too clean. My evenings stretched on forever. I kept thinking she'd come back, that maybe I'd hear the keys in the door or a soft knock or even just her voice calling out from the driveway. But she didn't. And I realized something terrifying. I had no one. Not really. I hadn't seen my own family in over a year. My friends had slowly drifted away after too many canceled plans, too many sorry can't tonight texts from me. All I had was my job, and even that felt like a thin rope I was barely hanging on to. For a while, I just existed. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat something, sleep. I went through the motions like a ghost. But somewhere in that fog of loneliness, something started to shift. It started small. I noticed how clean the house stayed, how peaceful it felt without someone stomping through the halls demanding attention. I sat on the couch and actually watched a movie without being interrupted. I cooked dinner for one, and it felt okay. Then one weekend, I drove out to the hardware store. I picked up paint, cleaning supplies, a few pieces of trim. I went home and started fixing up the guest house. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I pulled up the stained carpet, replaced it with hardwood I'd always liked but never got around to. I scrubbed the walls, repaired the cracked window, sanded and repainted the doors. It took me a few weeks. I worked slowly, methodically. But by the time I was done, the place looked better than it ever had before. And I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post pictures or talk about it at work. I just did it for myself. And that felt good. Then came the next thing. One of the guys at work, Jeremy from the design team, was organizing a volunteer build for Habitat for Humanity. I overheard him talking about it in the break room and surprised myself by speaking up. "You need an extra pair of hands." He blinked. "Oh yeah. Actually, we do. You good with tools?" Getting there. The following weekend, I showed up hammer in hand, gloves on, not knowing a single person besides Jeremy. And I'll be honest, at first I felt like an intruder. These people were laughing, working in sync, clearly comfortable with each other. But no one made me feel like an outsider. One guy, Dave, offered me a bottle of water and started chatting with me about power tools. By lunchtime, I was on the roof helping install siding. That night, I came home sore, sunburnt, and more fulfilled than I'd felt in months. I started going every weekend. Through that group, I met people, real people, kind people, People who didn't know anything about my wife or her brother or the wreckage I'd crawled out from. And for once, I didn't feel the need to explain it all. I could just show up, help build something, and leave a little stronger than I came. One of the volunteers, a woman named Erin, ran a small carpentry business out of her garage. She saw me measuring a cut one day and said, "You've got a good eye. Ever thought about doing this full time?" I laughed. "Nah. I sit behind a computer all day." She shrugged. "Doesn't mean you have to stay there." And that planted a seed. The next few weeks, I found myself researching woodworking tutorials, ordering small tools online, watching videos late into the night. I started making things. Simple at first, a birdhouse, a shelf, a coat rack, then a coffee table, then a bench. I turned the garage into a mini workshop and started posting my builds on a private Instagram account just for fun. And the weirdest thing happened. People started liking them, commenting, asking if I took commissions. That's when it clicked. I'd spent so long pouring energy into people who only took from me, who saw my kindness as weakness. But now every board I sanded, every joint I lined up, it felt like I was putting myself back together. Stronger, straighter, balanced. Then one Thursday night, I got a knock on the door. I opened it to find Layla standing there, suitcase in hand. I blinked. "Hey." She looked tired, a little disheveled, but her eyes were sharper than I remembered, clearer. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into the house like it was a museum, touching the countertop, glancing at the freshly vacuumed rug, eyeing the flowers I'd bought the day before. "Just because." "It's clean," she murmured. "Always is now." She turned to me. "I've been staying at Mom's, but it's not working." I nodded, saying nothing. "I miss us," she said. I studied her. "Which us? The one where I swallowed everything to keep the peace? Or the one where your brother walked all over me and you called me the problem?" She flinched. "That's not fair." "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." She looked away, eyes wet. "I didn't realize how bad it got," she said finally, "until I left. Until I had to listen to my mom make excuses for Brian every day the way she always did. I thought I was helping him. I thought I was keeping the family together. And I was just collateral damage." She didn't answer. "I rebuilt the guest house," I said, changing the subject. "Took out all the damage. It's good as new." "That's great," she whispered. "That's really great." We stood in silence for a while. Then she asked, "Can I come home?" And that was the question, wasn't it? Could she? After everything, I didn't answer right away because deep down, I wasn't sure. I'd finally started standing tall again, started making choices for me. Built something from nothing with no help, no validation, no audience. I was becoming someone new, someone I was proud of. And I wasn't sure if there was space in that new life for someone who once made me feel so small. But that decision would come later. For now, I offered her the guest house. "Stay there for a while," I said. "If you're serious about fixing this, we'll take it slow. But I'm not going back to how things were." She nodded. And for the first time in a long time, she listened. But what she didn't know was that while she was gone, I'd done something else. Something quiet. Something strategic. Because I wasn't just rebuilding myself. I was preparing for what came next. And if she ever crossed the line again, I was ready. More ready than she'd ever believe. The first few days of Layla living in the guest house were strange. Not bad exactly, just fragile, like walking across thin ice that hadn't yet cracked. We kept things polite, civil, no shouting, no big declarations, no dramatic makeups. She'd text me before coming into the main house, and I appreciated that. She cooked once or twice and left the meals in the fridge without a note. I mowed the lawn and left her side of the driveway clear. It felt more like neighbors than spouses. Two people coexisting with a shared past, pretending not to notice the giant crack running between them. I didn't ask where she'd been before that night she showed up. I didn't ask if she'd seen Brian since. I knew the answers would only sour the air. Instead, I focused on the things I could control. Every spare moment I had went into the workshop. The smell of sawdust became familiar, almost comforting. I kept making things: cutting boards, planter boxes, a side table with a secret drawer that I was particularly proud of. I opened an Etsy shop just to test the waters, and to my surprise, orders came in. Slowly at first, then more regularly. One person even asked if I offered custom work. I started to think maybe this could be something. Meanwhile, at work, something shifted too. My manager, a guy named Phil, who always wore too tight polos and talked like he was running for office, pulled me aside after a Monday morning meeting. "You've been different lately," he said, folding his arms. My stomach clenched. "In a bad way?" "No. Not at all." Sharper, more focused, like you're not second-guessing everything. I blinked. I didn't realize I was doing that. He grinned. You always have. But something's changed. He was right. Something had. By the end of the month, I'd submitted a proposal for a project we'd been sitting on for over a year. A streamlined data dashboard that would save clients hours of manual entry. It wasn't flashy, but it was smart, efficient, solid, and it got green-lit within 2 weeks. And for the first time in a long time, I started to feel like I wasn't just floating. I was steering, quietly, steadily. But in the background, something else was building. Something that had started the night Layla gave me that ultimatum in front of her brother and never really left. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was clarity. I couldn't go back to who I was. The pushover, the fixer, the guy who let other people decide what family meant while sacrificing his peace to make it work. No. If Brian ever tried to come back into our lives again, I wouldn't just be ready. I'd be 5 moves ahead. And that's when I started planning. See, Layla and I may have shared a home, a history, even a marriage certificate, but I owned everything, legally. The house, the land, the guest house, the bank accounts, all in my name. It wasn't out of spite. We just never gotten around to changing it after we married. At the time, she'd said, "Why bother, I trust you." Now I saw the irony. So the first thing I did was visit a lawyer. His name was Conrad. He had a sleepy voice and a sharp mind, and he didn't ask many questions, just listened, nodded, and slid a stack of documents across the table. Power of attorney, trust formation, emergency asset freeze protocol, eviction paperwork, pre-filled and ready to go with blank dates. If your brother-in-law shows up again, Conrad said you won't need to argue. Just file and let the law handle the rest. I signed every line. Then I asked about one more thing. How hard would it be to convert the guest house into an Airbnb? Conrad raised an eyebrow. You planning to kick her out? Not yet, I said, but I want options. He smiled. Smart man. When I got home that night, I sat in the workshop for 2 hours thinking. It wasn't just about Brian anymore. It was about the pattern. I kept seeing it over and over. People taking advantage of my kindness, twisting my silence into permission. And it was time I broke that pattern completely. Not just with Brian, but with Layla too. She needed to understand that forgiveness wasn't free. And if she truly wanted back into my life, she had to earn it. So I started setting boundaries. Real ones. Hard ones. First, I changed the Wi-Fi password and only gave it to her when she asked. She looked confused at first, but I smiled and said, "It's a fresh start, remember?" Then I rekeyed the main house, told her gently, just to be safe. She didn't argue. Next, I had security cameras installed. Nothing dramatic, just one over the driveway, one at the front door, one facing the guest house entrance. I framed it as just in case, and she nodded like she understood. But I saw the flicker of something in her eyes, like she knew. I was watching everything now, and I didn't trust her completely. She started texting more often, asking if I needed anything from the store, leaving cookies on the counter, suggesting we eat dinner together sometime. And I did once or twice. Small talk. Nothing deep. But I always ended early, kept the space between us. Then one night I saw her pacing outside the guest house, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and urgent. She didn't know I could see her from the workshop window. She was talking to Brian. I couldn't hear the words. But I saw her shoulders tense, her hand on her hip, the way she turned her back toward the house, like she didn't want to be overheard. I recorded a 30-second clip, just enough to keep on file. Then I waited. The next morning, I made her coffee and left it on her porch with a note that said, "Hope today's better." She texted back a heart emoji, but my mind was already miles ahead. I knew Brian wasn't done. Not a chance. He was the kind of guy who always circled back around when things quieted down, like a stray dog sniffing for scraps. And I had a sinking feeling he'd come crawling back to Layla soon. So I started digging. With the help of an old friend, Drew, who now worked in private investigations, I got access to Brian's most recent records. He was living in a shared motel room 3 towns over, rented under someone else's name. Multiple complaints filed against him for noise, unpaid damages, even a fistfight with another tenant over a parking spot. But here's where it got interesting. Drew also found out that Brian had recently applied for a personal loan using my address as his current residence. My address. He was trying to anchor himself to me again legally. And that's when I realized what this was. It wasn't just freeloading, it was strategy. If he could prove he lived on my property even temporarily, he could make things very messy if I ever tried to press charges or evict him again, especially if Layla supported his version of events. I felt my stomach twist into a knot, because that meant she wasn't just passively enabling him anymore. She was helping, or at the very least, protecting him. And that was the final straw. So I did what any logical betrayed husband would do. I built a trap. It started with an email, a very professional-sounding message from a new property management company, really just me using a business Gmail address, and a fake LLC name sent to Layla, informing her that the guest house would be undergoing routine inspections and evaluations in 2 weeks' time, followed by potential listing on a short-term rental platform. She replied the next day, "This is a surprise. Thought we discussed me staying longer." I replied, "You're welcome to submit a rental application if you'd like to pursue that route." She didn't, but I saw the panic start to grow. The second phase was a conversation I let her overhear a phone call in the kitchen where I casually discussed investors and turning the whole property into income-generating space. She asked about it that night. I shrugged. Just exploring options. She said nothing. Then, the third phase. I filed a formal change of residency notice with the city declaring that no one besides myself resided at the property, a document Brian would have to contest if he wanted to use my address for anything official. And just to be thorough, I reported the loan application to the fraud division of the lending company. By the end of that week, Brian's loan was flagged, his motel reported, and the paper trail he was trying to build shattered. But I wasn't finished because the best revenge isn't just defense, it's dominance. So I started planning an open house for the guest house, a real one this time. Posted anonymous ads, set a date, printed flyers. And when Layla asked me about it, quiet, uncertain, I simply said, "Everyone keeps telling me I need to think about my future. I think they're right," and walked away. She didn't follow, but I knew she would because I'd built something stronger than anger. I'd built leverage. And when the day came that Brian showed up again and I'd be ready. Only this time, I wouldn't just be defending my home. I'd be taking everything back piece by piece, and they'd never see it coming. The final domino fell on a Saturday afternoon in early spring. It had been exactly 90 days since Layla moved into the guest house, 90 quiet, careful, calculated days. I'd spent them rebuilding everything they had broken, not just the structure Brian trashed or the routines he disrupted, but the core of who I was. I'd learned to move differently, to listen more, to act less impulsively, and to anticipate instead of react. That was the difference between the old Weston and the man I'd become. The old Weston would have exploded, would have argued, pleaded, tried to prove something to people who didn't deserve an explanation. But the new me, I was done wasting energy on people who weaponized my patience. So when Brian finally came slithering back right on schedule, I was ready. It started with a knock at the front door. I'd just finished sealing a custom coffee table I planned to ship out Monday when I saw him through the window. Same cocky posture, same smug tilt of the chin, like he already owned whatever room he was about to walk into. But there was something else this time too. Desperation. His clothes were wrinkled, his face gaunt, and his shoes looked like they'd been pulled out of a Goodwill donation bin and lost a fight with a dog. I didn't open the door. I stepped outside and met him on the porch. He grinned like we were old college buddies. "Yo, Weston, long time, huh?" "Not long enough," I said. He raised his eyebrows as if I'd hurt his feelings. "Look, I just need to stay for a couple weeks. Nothing big. Layla said she doesn't live here." He blinked. "What?" "She said she's a guest, same as anyone else." That knocked the smirk off his face. "She's your wife, man. Not anymore." He stared at me confused, but I wasn't lying. I had quietly filed for separation the previous week, served her the paperwork through a process server, a clean professional cut. No yelling, no drama, just a notification and a return envelope. He shook his head, stepping forward. "Look, I just need a place for a little while. You've got space." "And come on, we're family." That word hit my ears like a siren. Family. I looked him dead in the eye. "You don't know the meaning of that word." Then I handed him a letter folded neatly in a sealed envelope. He took it, opened it, and scanned the top line. His eyes narrowed. "What the hell is this? An official cease and desist from my lawyer?" He scoffed. "For what?" "For claiming residence at my address, for fraudulently using my name on a loan application, for trespassing, for damages." His face paled. "You're bluffing." "I'm not. I also have footage of you smoking near the guest house while minors were present, evidence of property damage, and statements from neighbors who witnessed your fights. It's all documented, all packaged, all ready." "For what?" He snapped, eyes wide now. "You going to call the cops on your brother-in-law?" I shrugged. "No need." Because that's when the second wave hit. A white car pulled into the driveway. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out, clipboard in hand, badge visible on her hip. Behind her, a black SUV with the logo of the county's housing enforcement office rolled up slowly and parked along the curb. Brian turned to me. "What the hell is this?" "I told you," I said, calm as ever. "I'm not bluffing." He ran his mouth, said something about how this was illegal, how I'd regret it, how I was ruining lives. I didn't listen because I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it for closure. The housing officer informed him that his previous attempt to use my address had triggered a citywide check. The motel he had stayed in had been cited for multiple violations, and Brian's name was now tied to 2 fraudulent applications. A probation officer would be reviewing the situation. The officer asked if Brian had a permanent address. He stammered, looked at me. I shook my head. "He doesn't live here." The woman nodded. "That's what we thought." They asked him to leave the property immediately. And for once, for the first time since he'd bulldozed his way into my life, Brian didn't have anything to say. No smug comebacks, no insults. He just walked to the curb, muttering under his breath, and waited for a ride. I didn't watch him go. I had nothing left to prove. But I wasn't done yet, because Layla, she'd made her choices too. When I served her the separation notice, she didn't respond at first, just disappeared into the guest house for 2 days. Then she asked to talk. We sat on the porch, the same place she defended her brother like he was some wounded animal I had kicked out of the house. She looked tired, sad, but not apologetic. "I didn't know he was going to do that," she said quietly. "I thought he was just staying out of trouble." I didn't reply. I just wanted to help my family. "You did," I said. "Just not the one you married into." Her eyes flickered. "So that's it? You're done." "I was done the day you threatened to leave me over him." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You can stay in the guest house for 2 more weeks, I told her. "After that, it's being converted into a rental. The locks will change, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't contact me unless it's through the attorney." She blinked hard, and I saw the tears come. But I didn't comfort her because I'd finally learned the difference between kindness and enabling. That night, I sat in the workshop and looked around at everything I'd built, real, solid, lasting things. Not just furniture, but confidence, freedom, clarity. The revenge hadn't been loud. It had been precise, quiet, intentional. And it worked. Brian never came back. Layla moved out exactly 2 weeks later, left a note that said, "I didn't realize I'd lose you too." I folded it and placed it in a drawer where it still sits untouched. I didn't lose anything. I let go. And sometimes that's the most powerful revenge of all. Because now I wake up in a home that feels like mine again. I run my business. I spend weekends with people who respect me. I build things that last. And no one walks through my door without earning it. Not anymore. I was never the villain. I just finally stopped being the doormat. And when I closed that chapter of my life, I didn't slam the door. I locked it and threw away the key.